The grand ballroom of the Sacramento Marriott buzzed with the clink of crystal glasses and the murmur of well-dressed guests, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Judge Samuel Coleman stepped out into the cool March night, the echo of polite applause from his speech still ringing in his ears. The charity gala had been a triumph. His words on equal justice under the law had stirred the crowd, earning nods from philanthropists and skeptical glances from old money skeptics in tailored suits. At 45, Samuel adjusted his cufflinks, his sharp black tuxedo, a quiet testament to a career forged against the odds. He inhaled deeply, the crisp air a welcome relief after hours of stuffy formality, and made his way toward the valet station, where his sleek black Lexus sedan gleamed under a flickering street lamp, its polished surface reflecting the city lights. Before we dive in, where are you tuning in from? Hit like if you believe justice should wear no blinders, and subscribe for more stories that cut deep and spark real change. Because what's about to unfold isn't just a late-night drive, it's a showdown between power and prejudice that'll ripple far beyond these Sacramento streets. The young white valet, a kid barely out of high school with a nervous twitch in his hands, glanced at Samuel, his eyes darting from the judge's face to the luxury car behind him. Sir, you sure this is your car?" he asked, his voice polite but tinged with doubt, as if the idea of a black man claiming such a vehicle stretched belief. Samuel paused, the question landing like a familiar jab, sharp, subtle, but no less cutting for it. He'd faced this too many times, the sidelong looks, the raised eyebrows, the quiet assumption that his success couldn't possibly be his own. He forced a tight smile, fishing the valet ticket from his pocket with deliberate calm. "Pretty sure," he said, handing it over, his tone even but laced with an edge only he could feel. The kid hesitated, his fingers fumbling with the ticket, then shot a quick glance at his coworker, a silent question passing between them before shuffling off to retrieve the Lexus. Samuel stood under the lamp's glow, the night air brushing against his skin, frustration simmering in his chest like a low flame. It wasn't outright hostility, not the kind you could call out and confront. It was subtler, 1,000 small cuts that bled over time, reminders that even as a federal judge, he couldn't escape the weight of others' disbelief. He slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and smooth against his back, and adjusted his mirrors with practiced precision. The engine purred to life, a soft hum that grounded him as he pulled away from the valet area, merging onto the near-empty streets of downtown Sacramento. The city unfolded before him, flickering streetlights casting long shadows, the occasional car gliding past, the distant hum of traffic fading into the night. It was a 15-minute drive home to his quiet suburb, a routine he'd done 100 times. He let his shoulders relax, the gala's tension easing with each mile, until a flicker in his rearview mirror caught his eye, a police cruiser trailing behind him, its headlights a steady glare. At first, he dismissed it. Just a patrol, he told himself, a coincidence cutting through the Sacramento darkness. He switched lanes smoothly, signaling early, keeping everything textbook, "Nothing to see here, officer." The cruiser followed, matching his move with a deliberate pace. He slowed for a stoplight, hands steady at 10 and 2, and the police car edged closer, its lights flooding his cabin with a harsh white glow that made his dashboard gleam. Samuel's grip tightened on the wheel, his pulse ticking up a notch, a familiar tension coiling in his gut. He'd been here before, not this exact stretch of asphalt, but this feeling, watched, shadowed, singled out for reasons he could name, but never prove in the moment. He exhaled slowly, made a right turn with careful precision, hoping the cruiser would peel off towards some other errand. It didn't. Then the red and blue lights erupted behind him, slicing through the night with a piercing siren wail that jolted his nerves. "Damn it!" Samuel muttered under his breath, his voice low but steady. He signaled, pulling over to the curb with measured calm, keeping his hands visible on the steering wheel, 10 and 2, just like his father had taught him decades ago, a lesson born from necessity rather than choice. He'd done nothing wrong, speed limit obeyed, turns clean, every traffic law followed to the letter. And yet, here he was, the weight of history pressing against his ribs like a vice. The cruiser rolled to a stop behind him, its floodlights bathing his Lexus in an eerie, unnatural glow that turned the night surreal. He watched in the side mirror as the officer stepped out, boots thudding heavily on the pavement, silhouette sharp and menacing against the glare. A sharp knock rattled his window, the sound abrupt and demanding. Samuel pressed the button to roll it down, revealing Officer Tara Mitchell, a blonde woman with cold, calculating eyes and a jaw set tight, with something that looked like restrained disdain. Her uniform was crisp, her badge glinting under the streetlight, but her posture screamed control, hand resting on her holster, shoulders squared like she owned the road. "License and registration," she said, her voice curt and clipped, dripping with a hostility she didn't bother to mask. Samuel nodded, moving slowly, deliberately to retrieve his wallet from his tuxedo jacket, every motion calculated to avoid giving her an excuse. "Officer, may I ask why I've been pulled over?" he asked, his tone steady, polite, but firm, a judge's voice, honed by years of commanding courtrooms and cutting through bullshit. Tara didn't answer immediately. Her gaze flicked over his car, the polished exterior, the leather interior, then back to his face, lingering on his dark skin, his steady eyes, as if searching for something to pin on him. Her lips twisted into a faint sneer. "You were driving a little aggressively back there," she said, the words flimsy, a threadbare excuse that hung in the air like smoke. Samuel frowned, his mind replaying the last 10 minutes, every turn signaled, every speed checked, every move impeccable. This wasn't about driving, it was about him. He handed over his license and registration, watching as her eyes scanned the documents, then paused. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face, quickly hardening into something darker, something dangerous. "Judge, huh?" she muttered, her tone dripping with mockery, as if the very idea of a black man holding that title was absurd, a punchline she refused to buy. Samuel held her stare, unflinching, his calm a shield against her venom. "That's correct," he said simply, his voice a quiet anchor in the storm brewing between them. A taut silence stretched, the air thick with unspoken tension. A standoff neither would name. Then Tara let out a sharp, mocking laugh, shaking her head like she'd caught him in a lie. "Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. A black judge? What's next, you moonlight in the NBA?" The words landed like a slap, crude and deliberate, but Samuel didn't flinch. He'd heard it all before: athlete, rapper, thug, every stereotype thrown at him like darts, none sticking because he'd built himself beyond them. Instead of rising to her bait, he leaned slightly forward, his eyes locking with hers. "I'd like to know the real reason for this stop," he said, his voice a blade quiet, precise, cutting through her pretense. Tara's smirk faded, replaced by a colder, more calculating edge. "Step out of the vehicle," she ordered, her hand tightening on her holster, her stance shifting to assert dominance. Samuel's jaw clenched, his mind racing through the options: comply and risk escalation, refuse and hand her the resisting excuse she clearly craved. Either way, the deck was stacked against him, a game he'd seen played out in headlines and hushed family stories. Slowly, he reached for the door handle, stepping out into the chilly night air, his polished shoes silent on the asphalt, his tuxedo stark against the cruiser's glare. "Turn around, hands on the car," she barked, her command sharp, leaving no room for negotiation. A part of him burned to resist, to demand an explanation, to throw his title in her face and watch her squirm, but he knew the stakes. He'd seen the videos, the funerals, the body cam footage that never told the full truth. He placed his hands firmly on the Lexus roof, feeling her grip his shoulders roughly, shoving him forward with a force that was pure theater, meant to degrade. "You're making a mistake," he said evenly, his voice steady despite the pressure against his back, the cold metal seeping through his jacket. "You don't want to do this?" Tara tightened her hold, pressing him harder against the car. "I'll be the judge of that," she sneered, the irony lost in her arrogance. In that moment, Samuel knew this wasn't about law or justice. It was about power, about her need to control someone she'd already convicted in her mind's warped court. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of how you look? Comment 1 if you think Samuel's handling this with steel, like if this hits too close to home, and subscribe to see justice play out. Because Tara's about to find out who she just locked horns with, and it's a reckoning she won't see coming. Samuel felt the cold steel of the Lexus against his chest as Tara's fingers dug into his wrists, twisting them behind his back with a roughness that screamed intent. The cuffs snapped shut with a harsh metallic click, biting into his skin, an unnecessary flourish designed to humiliate, to strip him of the dignity he'd spent a lifetime building. He kept his breathing even, his face a mask of calm, refusing to give her the flinch or stammer she clearly wanted. He'd dismantled power plays in courtrooms, turned them to dust with logic and law, but this was different. Raw, unscripted, a street-level game where Tara held the badge and the gun. Her radio crackled to life, static cutting through the night. "Got a possible stolen vehicle suspect in custody," she said, her voice calm, detached, spinning a lie with the ease of someone who'd done it before. "That's a lie," Samuel said, his tone controlled but firm, each word measured to pierce her facade. "This is my car, and you know it." Tara scoffed, her grip tightening as she yanked him toward her cruiser. "Yeah, well, let's see what the system says, huh?" The words dripped with disdain, a flimsy shield for her real game. Samuel could feel the weight of history crashing down the countless black men before him, wrongfully accused, humiliated, reduced to statistics because of officers like her. Another cruiser pulled up, its headlights adding to the blinding glare that turned the scene into a stark tableau. Officer Greg Larson stepped out, younger, his face flickering with uncertainty as he took it in Samuel in cuffs. Tara's smug stance, the tension thick enough to choke on. Larson's eyes widened slightly, a spark of recognition flashing, but he stayed silent, a passive shadow in Tara's orbit. She smirked, shoving Samuel toward the back of her car, the cuffs digging deeper as she forced him into the seat. "Don't worry, Judge," she mocked, her voice a cruel sing-song. "I'll handle your case personally." The door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. Samuel stared ahead through the cruiser's scratched window, his mind already 3 steps ahead, plotting the moves she couldn't anticipate. She had no idea who she just caged, not yet. Larson finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Mitchell, maybe we should run his plates," Tara cut him off, her glare sharp enough to silence him mid-sentence. Larson hesitated, his fingers hovering over his radio, then typed the info into his dashboard with reluctant taps. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the static buzz of the police radio. Samuel watched in the side mirror as Larson's expression shifted, eyes widening, shoulders tensing, fingers freezing over the keys as the truth hit. "What's the holdup, Larson?" Tara snapped, her impatience sharpening her tone like a blade. Larson swallowed hard, running a hand over his face, his voice unsteady. "He's telling the truth. Cars is registered to Samuel Coleman, federal judge." The air stilled. Tara's jaw tightened, her nostrils flaring. But it wasn't relief that crossed her face. It was fury, raw and unfiltered, like she'd been robbed of a victory she'd already claimed. She turned back to Samuel, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Then why were you acting so suspicious?" Samuel let out a short, humorless laugh, the sound cutting through her accusation. "Suspicious? You mean, why didn't I grovel when you treated me like a criminal for no reason?" Her expression darkened, her hands balling into fists. But before she could fire back, a sharp voice broke the standoff. "Hey, I got it all on video." A young black man stood on the sidewalk, phone raised high, hands trembling but steady as he filmed. His voice rose, urgent and defiant. "This is racial profiling straight up. That's Judge Coleman you just cuffed for nothing. What you gotta say, officer?" Tara's face drained of color, not from fear, but from the searing rage of being caught. She marched toward the man, her boots pounding the pavement. "Turn that off now," she snarled, her voice low and threatening. But he held his ground, his lens unwavering. "Or what?" he shot back, his tone shaking but resolute. "You gonna arrest me too for telling the truth?" Samuel stepped forward as Tara fumbled with the cuffs, her fingers slipping in her haste to unlock them. "Officer Mitchell," he said, his voice smooth but firm, cutting through the chaos. "You've made one mistake tonight. Don't make another." Her glare could have melted steel, but the camera and the growing crowd of onlookers pulling out their own phones pinned her in place. She yanked the cuffs off with a jerk, the metal scraping his wrists, then stormed to her cruiser, slamming the door with a force that rattled the frame. The engine roared, and she peeled off, tires screeching against the asphalt in a furious retreat. Samuel turned to the young man, nodding with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy with sincerity. The man nodded back, swallowing hard. "I've seen this too many times with no proof. And they walk free. Not tonight." Samuel's chest tightened, a mix of gratitude and deep, aching sadness settling over him. He knew the stakes. The young man spoke of the stories whispered in barbershops, the names etched on memorials, the lives lost to silence. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, Samuel strode through the marble corridors of the Sacramento Federal Courthouse, his polished shoes clicking with purpose against the gleaming floor. The viral video had spread like wildfire, overnight local news, splashed with federal judge racially profiled and shocking stop. National outlets like CNN and MSNBC picking it up with headlines screaming outrage. Social media had erupted, hashtags trending, comments flooding in. "This is America in 2025, disgraceful. She needs to lose her badge yesterday." The pressure on the Sacramento PD was a tidal wave, and the police chief had no choice but to call an internal review hearing. Samuel was there to make sure Tara Mitchell faced the consequences she'd earned. The conference room was a pressure cooker, stale coffee scent mingling with tension, the long wooden table flanked by stern faces. Tara sat at one end, her uniform crisp but her posture stiff, her lips pressed into a thin line as she gripped a pen like a lifeline. Chief Justice Robert Langston, Samuel's mentor and the state's most formidable judicial figure, stood beside him, his deep voice rumbling with restrained fury. "I saw the video, Sam. It's unacceptable beyond unacceptable." Across from Tara sat the police commissioner, a heavy-set man with salt and pepper hair and an expression carved from stone, flanked by two internal affairs officers, their folders thick with evidence. The monitor flickered to life, and the room fell silent as the grainy footage played Tara's mocking black judge taunt, the rough shove, the cuffs snapping shut, her venomous next time threat as she shoved him into the cruiser. The silence that followed was deafening, a weight that pressed against every chest in the room. Tara straightened, her voice clipped and defiant. "He was uncooperative. I had reason to believe he was a threat." Langston's voice sliced through her excuse like a guillotine. "A threat? A federal judge was a threat to you?" Samuel leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers, his tone measured but piercing. "Do you treat every traffic stop with this hostility, Officer Mitchell, or just the ones where the driver looks like me?" Her fingers twitched, her fists clenching tighter, but she had no answer, not one that wouldn't damn her further. The commissioner exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple as if staving off a headache. "Officer Mitchell, based on this evidence and the public outcry, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Surrender your badge and firearm now." Tara shot to her feet, her chair scraping back with a screech. "This is ridiculous. You're throwing me under the bus for doing my job. A video doesn't show the full story." "Enough," the commissioner snapped, his patience worn to threads. "Your conduct's indefensible. The department's issuing a statement, and you're done until we say otherwise." Her face flushed red, her body rigid with rage, but she complied, slamming her badge onto the table with a clatter. As she stormed out, she paused by Samuel, her voice a low hiss. "This isn't over." He met her glare, unflinching. "It's just beginning," he said, his calm a promise she couldn't shake. 6 months later, Samuel sat behind the towering mahogany bench of his courtroom, his black robe heavy with authority, his gavel resting within reach. The gallery was packed, reporters scribbling, spectators whispering, the air electric with anticipation. Before him sat Tara Mitchell, stripped of her uniform, dressed in a plain gray suit, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a brittle defiance that flickered like a dying flame. She'd once wielded power with reckless abandon. Now she faced its judgment. The prosecution laid out the case with surgical precision, the viral video, witness statements, a pattern of complaints against Tara, unearthed by the investigation. Excessive force, racial bias, misconduct, buried for years under bureaucratic shrugs. Her attorney flailed, tossing out tired defenses, just doing her job, a misunderstanding, no intent. But the words fell flat, hollow in the face of the evidence. Samuel listened, his expression unreadable, his mind sharp and focused. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability, about a system forced to reckon with its flaws. He leaned forward, his voice steady and resonant, filling the room. Officer Tara Mitchell, you stand accused of misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of power. The evidence is overwhelming video proof, a history of complaints, your own words condemning you. You were entrusted with the law and used it to oppress rather than protect. That's not a violation of protocol, it's a betrayal of justice itself. Tara's jaw tightened, her eyes burning, but she stayed silent. What could she say? Samuel inhaled slowly, his next words deliberate, each one a hammer strike. This court finds you guilty of gross misconduct. You are stripped of all legal authority, you will never wear a badge again. You're sentenced to court-mandated racial bias training, and your record will reflect this for any future employer to see. A sharp gasp rippled through the courtroom. It wasn't prison, wasn't a criminal conviction, but for Tara, it was worse permanent disgrace, a scarlet letter etched into her future. As she was escorted out, she turned, her voice a venomous whisper. "This isn't over!" Samuel's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, not triumph, but certainty. "It's just beginning," he said, soft enough for only her to hear. The door closed behind her, her footsteps fading into silence. Outside, the sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Samuel emerged, the weight of the trial clinging to him like a second skin. The air buzzed with voices, journalists shouting questions, bystanders snapping photos, but his focus landed on the young black man waiting at the bottom, the one who'd filmed that night. His hands were shoved into his pockets, his shoulders tense, his face uncertain, yet hopeful. "I just wanted to say," the man began, his voice quieter now, "what you did in there. People like me, we don't see that often. Someone with power who looks like us, who fights back." Samuel studied him, seeing the exhaustion, the years of learned doubt in his eyes. He extended his hand, firm and unwavering. "Then let's make sure it's not so rare," he said. The man blinked, then shook it, a pact sealed in the fading light. As Samuel turned toward his car, the courthouse shrinking in his rear view, he knew this was just one battle in a war far from won. But it was a start, a crack in the wall, a promise kept. This isn't just one judge's story, it's a mirror to a system that's failed too many for too long. How many times has justice hung on a shaky video? Comment 1 if Samuel nailed it, like if Tara's fall feels right, and subscribe for more stories that demand better. Share this if you believe one voice can shift the tide, because next time, it might be yours. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.